Welcome to the Hanu Health Podcast, where our mission is to help you to find daily joy, peace, and contentment. On this show, we discuss a variety of topics and provide pathways for improving emotional and mental well-being. However, none of the education and information should be taken as direct therapeutic suggestion or advice. In other words, your medical doctor or mental health professional is your best bet if you have specific concerns. Also on this podcast, we interview numerous guests from diverse backgrounds and interests, and they may carry some unique ideas. Hanu Health as a company does not endorse all statements provided by guests or condone all suggestions or protocols discussed. We just like hearing from the world's leading experts in mental well-being. We're grateful that you're here and hope that the information discussed helps you on your journey. Welcome to the show. Welcome back, everybody, Hanu family. The last time I came on here, I apologize for there being such a lapse or gap in between the last time you heard a podcast. And I sound like a broken record, but here I am again saying, sorry, there's been a bit of a gap between the last time there was a podcast released and now. I really hope to change that. We really want this to be something that's valuable for you as the listener in terms of what you can take and actionably apply to your life. And so we're back. I debated for so long as to whether or not I would do this podcast, not the podcast in general, but this episode in particular, because I want to more or less lay out some of my own vulnerabilities, if you will. There's this interesting notion, I think, in the field of health and wellness, but especially in mental health, that the individual, based on their specialty, should kind of have it all together within the context of their own specialty. So in other words, cardiovascular disease doctor or cardiologist, that is, they should not be stricken with cardiovascular disease. A endocrinologist should not be stricken with diabetes. Why? Well, because they should know better. And maybe there's partial truth to that, but there's also a lot of things that are outside of our understanding when it comes to these areas. One component that I want to mention, or something I heard before, and I thought that this was really insightful and it stuck with me, was this notion that we don't expect an oncologist never to get cancer. So why would we never experience, or never expect, I should say, a psychologist, mental health practitioner, a therapist to never experience emotional or mental health issues? To think that, I think, is a huge fallacy. So I'm here today to open up and be vulnerable about all things my own emotional health and mental wellness, because I don't think that we should expect a mental health practitioner to never experience mental health struggles. And then if we do, I want to be able to convey that to you. I want you to understand my experience, even as a psychologist, as the co-founder and chief scientific officer of Hanu. I want you to understand that I experience these things. I have access to basically all the tools in the world, including Hanu, but sometimes I don't take advantage of them. Sometimes I let emotional instability get in the way. It's a very topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I just felt compelled to share with you my own personal struggles, and then tell you what I'm doing about it and what's helpful for me, with the intention of nothing other than letting you know that you're not alone in this, and that emotional and mental health are really important. And they should be the pyramid, I should say the bottom of the pyramid for you in terms of importance, and what we should have at, again, the base of our knowledge and understanding and practice of health and wellness. Why do I feel the need right now to do it? Well, I feel the need right now because I have been experiencing difficulty and dysregulation with things related to stress, anxiety, and sadness over the course of the last 6 months. As many of you know who are listening, tuning in, watching on YouTube, or listening to our podcast, you'll know that Hanu formed in August of 2021. We started coding and building our software platform in January of 2022, and we launched in October of 2022. Now, if you're someone who's in the world of startups and technology, you will know that going from 0 to 1, if you can put it that way, but going from nothing to something, or at least going out to market from January to October, so the span of essentially 9 to 10 months, is really fast. It's really quick. It's a really hardcore work pace. And there was a lot of time. There was a lot of effort. There was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, if you will, throughout that process. And so for me, it took its toll. It took its toll on me mentally and physically. And a lot of the members on the Hanu team, we all experienced that. It was a difficult process. Part of it is just naturally what occurs in the startup world, but I would say that a lot of it also was self-imposed. And a lot of it was because I wasn't tuning into my level of self-awareness and self-regulation, two tools that I teach here at Hanu. I had backed away from them, and maybe intentionally. We might call that avoidance. We might call that being on autopilot in life. But I would say that for me, I did not come to the true realization of how much I was struggling until recently. And now I've kind of turned those knobs of self-awareness and self-regulation back on and kind of facing or accepting kind of my experience, because I know that avoidance of that experience is only going to cause detriment and harm. So I'm coming to you to share with you what I did and what I'm doing, what I will hope to continue to do in my own mental and emotional health journey. And if you're someone who is on this journey, which you are because you're human, you have a heartbeat, you have a brain, you inevitably are going to experience periods of chronic stress, anxiety, depression, God forbid, things like traumatic experiences, or even severe and persistent mental health. All of these things are a part of life experience, especially stress, anxiety, and depression. The numbers are quite staggering on how many people experience these things. But what do we actually do about it? What can we implement that will truly move the needle? Do things like breath work and mindfulness meditation and HRV biofeedback, are they helpful? Yeah, they are. They're amazing tools. Will each of them individually cure mental illness? I'm not so sure I believe in that. I think it's a combination of many different things and not just one tool. Do I think that just simply doing functional breath training or breath work will be the cure to my anxiety? I think it'll help a lot. I think it will move the needle tremendously. Is it the sole answer? For some, it could be, but for most, it's not going to be. For most people, it's going to be a combination of many different things that truly move the needle for mental health. So I want to start off a little bit. I just think it makes sense to share with you a bit of my own personal journey and background. Obviously, many of you know that I'm a clinical psychologist. So I went to school to be a clinical psychologist, which means work with clinical populations, those who are diagnosed with a clinical disorder that might be found in what we call the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM. It's kind of like the diagnostic handbook or Bible for psychologists, psychiatrists, and other mental health professionals. A lot of people get into this field as what we call wounded healers, individuals who have experienced significant emotional or mental health struggles in their life, and then want to learn about it for both themselves, but also because they want to help others who are going through it. They can empathize. They've been in those shoes because they've lived out that experience. I can't say that I am someone who was necessarily driven consciously to this position or to this job because of that mentality. But, and I've been doing a lot of personal reflection here lately, I do believe that I was driven from fear. The biggest thing for me is that I look back on my childhood and growing up, and I felt like I had a lot to live up to. I felt a lot of pressure, some internally for myself and some externally. And in an effort to not go into too much regarding my upbringing, family dynamics, everything going on there, I will say that there was pressure. There was always pressure there. And I had a lot of unrealized anxiety and stress growing up all throughout childhood and into adolescence and then even to college. I had a fair amount of anxiety and perfectionism and a lot of type A driven behavior. And then also a lot of avoidance behaviors and a lot of things that could help me drift away. And I find myself ebbing and flowing. It's like waves for me, where sometimes I feel like I'm riding on top of the wave and I'm surfing, hanging 10, like really enjoying the experience. Feel very motivated, very passionate, very driven, very excitable. And then there's other times where the wave breaks and I'm on top and then I get crushed. And isn't that how emotional experience works sometimes? Is that sometimes the emotion can rain very heavy in one direction or another. The highs can be really high and the lows can be really low. And I think that if I look at my life, I would say that I'm that individual who rides a lot of highs really high and rides a lot of lows really low. And it's always kind of driven by this underlying core experience of stress and having to kind of live up to my expectations and kind of those expectations that I perceived others have put on me. I came to basically the realization in the last few months that a lot of my stress and anxiety and times of sadness was being driven by guilt and shame and feeling like I was a bit of, I guess, more or less, you could say, a hypocrite. Because I'm a psychologist, right? I should have everything all together. It's back to the first thing I was saying at the beginning of the podcast. I should have all my stuff together, right? I should have everything in line. People expect me to treat them for stress and anxiety and depression and other mental and emotional health problems. I should have that all together. And the fact of the matter is I don't. Will I ever have it all together? No, I don't think I will. I don't think I'll have it all together ever. I'll experience times of stress and anxiety and depression. Why? Because I'm human. Is it the experience that's problematic, or is it the behavior or the action that follows that's problematic? I would argue the latter. And I'm going to talk a lot about that in my own personal journey here in just a second. But for me, I came to this fork in the road where I said to myself, am I going to be a hypocrite anymore? Because I'm not practicing what I preach from a mental health standpoint. And I know that it's really hard for me to be objective sometimes. And I need the input from others. I need the support and the accountability from others. Something, again, I preach a lot as the co-founder of Hanu, but also as a psychologist. But I wasn't practicing what I preach. So it leads to a lot of guilt and shame. And so I'm here because I'm taking back my mental health wellness. I'm taking back my emotional health. I'm learning how to regulate my emotional experience in a proper way without pushing it aside, compartmentalizing and avoiding, which is something that can come quite naturally to me. And I can reinforce it really easily. So I want to talk now about my journey. If you've heard the Hanu Health podcast before, or you heard me speak on other podcasts before, you know that I talk about the 4 pillars of health. We talk about high quality nutrition, high quality sleep, high quality exercise, and then stress mitigation or stress resiliency. And there's a lot that kind of falls under that fourth pillar. The one thing that I've had a really difficult time with here recently isn't the exercise component, the sleep component, or the nutrition component. I've actually had those pretty dialed in, and I've been doing a lot to dial those in. But the stress mitigation tactics I haven't had as dialed in. And a lot of it is it's the desire to avoid that experience. Think about when you've felt stressed or anxious or depressed. Do you want to sit with that state? Like, is it fun to sit with your anxiety? Is it fun to sit with your stress? Is it fun to sit with sadness and grief? I haven't met many people who would say that's fun. But what happens if over and over and over again, you completely avoid it? You put it aside. Humans do one of two things, right? You implode or you explode. That's the direction you go if you do not face the experience of emotional and mental health difficulties. There's a therapeutic modality in the mental health space. And when I say modality, I'm talking about an approach, a school of thought or a school of training. If you think about like in different types of diets from a nutritional standpoint, the therapy modalities that psychologists and mental health practitioners use are kind of like choosing a diet. And there's a lot of dogma in the field of psychotherapy. Like if you are a CBT practitioner, a cognitive behavioral therapist, or if you're a psychoanalytic therapist, or if you're a interpersonal therapist or a family dynamic therapist, there's kind of like these dogmatic battles that occur in the field of psychology, very similar to nutrition or in exercise, right? You know, it's everywhere in health and wellness. There's one notion that I would say has been perpetuated fairly often in the mental health space by mental health practitioners and some schools of mental health therapy, most particularly in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is been all about catching and challenging thoughts and replacing thoughts with quote unquote more realistic or positive thoughts. You know, I ascribed to that notion a long time ago. And I found that there was a lot of temporary relief that it could provide through the analysis process, but it was very short-lived. It never really fully solved the problem of stress or anxiety for me. Now, I want to kind of mention before I go any further that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is an extremely powerful evidence-based therapy for mental health related issues. It's been found to be effective for helping to reduce experience of anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, you kind of name it. CBT is just an effective evidence-based practice, but it doesn't mean that I agree with everything. So for instance, like the good about CBT is this whole idea of like catching automatic and intrusive thoughts. Like that's a really good concept to have. Catching kind of the automatic kind of just bubble bursting thoughts that occur. Like that's a really good thing. Intrusive thoughts, that's a really good thing to at least acknowledge instead of trying to push away. So catching those things are really good. I also think that from a CBT perspective, linking your thoughts and behavior with one another also, linking your thoughts with emotion and behavior is a really good concept to analyze. But the biggest problem would be this whole idea of like replacing thoughts or challenging thoughts. And if you've heard me talk about other podcasts and talk about kind of like the modality that I won't say subscribe to because I don't want this to be overly dogmatic, but one of the ones that I'm more fond of, if you will, that I utilize more frequently is something called ACT, or acceptance and commitment therapy, which challenges the notion of challenging your thoughts and actually has us analyze whether or not we're being fused with our thoughts or hooked to our thoughts. And instead of trying to replace them or think about challenging them or asking if they're realistic or not, it has you just sit with it. It's a state of acceptance, a state of mindfulness. It helps us to deconnect from those thoughts as just language and narrative, as opposed to deconstruct by replacing thoughts and narrative. It's all about mindfulness and then also linking what you're doing with your value system. And the reason I share this is because the biggest thing that I've done in the last few months is analyze what is it that matters to me. Because if I'm going to live a values-driven life, then my behavior, sure as all get out, better be connected to my values. It better be congruent. And if it's not congruent, I need to ask why. And then I need to commit to a new action so that I can live a life that is congruent with what I say is my value, in line with my value system. Family is my biggest value. And it is the one that I keep coming back to over and over and over again, because it is the one that is my true driver. And so when I think about my family, I think, what am I doing right now? Is it working me towards my value, or is it working away? Is it pulling me away from living a values-driven life? And that's where ACT has really come in to help me defuse from this narrative, this challenging narrative, to help me quit compartmentalizing and stuffing it away and just simply allowing myself to sit and experience emotion. Experiencing emotion and sitting with it is very difficult. It is not easy. Comes back to that whole idea that nobody likes to feel anxious or stressed or depressed. It's not a fun thing. But the reason that we do sit with it is because we want to accept and acknowledge that that experience can be directive. It can help guide us. Even if in the moment it doesn't feel like that, it can offer itself as a guide. It warns us. It has us question, again, if whether or not what we're doing is in line with our value system. So for me, it's been a matter of really doing what I can to shift my focus, to be more mindful, to be more values driven, and to diffuse from the narrative, the inner dictator that sits on the shoulder constantly chirping, and ask myself every time, is that helpful? Is it workable? A lot of times I'll just thank my mind. Yeah, thanks a lot, mind. And that may sound silly. It's an ACT practice, but it may sound silly to thank your mind. But a lot of times it's just acknowledging that it's there. The other thing that I found really helpful from an ACT perspective is using a diffusion technique that instead of saying, I'm feeling anxious right now, it's saying I'm noticing I'm feeling anxious right now. I'm noticing that I'm having a thought that is making me feel anxious right now. If you think about the way those two are worded, which is intentional, we intentionally change the wording, we can actually unhook and diffuse ourselves from that thought and that experience in a very healthy way. Instead of defining myself as I'm anxious right now and saying I'm noticing that I'm anxious right now, it gives it a lot less power. For instance, if I tell you right now that in the next 60 seconds, I want you to say the word lemons. Yeah, you heard me right. Lemons. As many times as you can out loud for 60 seconds. Go. Feel free. Stop the podcast, pause it, and stop the video right now. Go. 60 seconds, lemons. What you would find is that after around 30 seconds or so, it just sounds like noise. It doesn't even sound like words anymore. It's a great practice, actually, to diffuse. If you were to take a word or something that is a part of your narrative, I'm incompetent, I'm stupid, I'll never make it, and you repeat that a word that's connected to that over and over and over again, it starts to lose its meaning and value and has a lot less control over you. And that is a practice that I implement a fair amount. Like the word incompetent. It's one I use a lot in my own narrative. Sometimes I'll just say that word over and over and over again for 60 seconds. And it just sounds like noise. And it has a lot less power because I'm diffusing from that word, from the frame of that word. So that's how I've been using ACT and more therapeutic tools as a mechanism to help me with persistent states of stress and anxiety and depression over the last few months. I've also been incorporating a lot of other main tools for emotional health. So let's talk about those pillars. Exercise. Listen to a lot of different podcasts and audiobooks, and then read Peter Attia's new book, Outlive. And from an exercise perspective, he places emphasis on 3 primary areas. One is strength and muscle mass, so resistance training, weightlifting, something I was already doing. The other one is aerobic capacity. That comes from things like zone 2 training or low heart rate training. And then VO2 max training or increasing VO2 max. And I've paid a lot of emphasis for mental and physical health on VO2 max training. VO2 max is essentially the maximum amount of oxygen that you can take in at its peak. And that number is directly correlated with longevity outcomes. So as we increase our VO2 max, we increase longevity markers related to cardiovascular or cardiorespiratory fitness, but other things as well from a physiological perspective. But we know too that it has a direct impact, and there's research that indicates this. It has a direct impact on mental and emotional health, which is very compelling. So for me, I've been doing zone 2 training, generally 4 to 5 times a week for about 45 minutes, low heart rate, also lactate threshold based. We don't have enough time necessarily in this podcast to go into that one, but low heart rate. And this is all, again, for aerobic capacity, increasing cardiorespiratory fitness that we know is great for physiological health, mental health, and overall longevity and enhancing lifespan and health span. But also I've been doing zone 5 and VO2 max training religiously for twice a week. What I do are interval trainings. These generally last around an hour or so. I do about a 10-minute warm up, and then I do a VO2 max interval for 4 minutes. If you don't know your VO2 max, which a lot of wearables like will tell you, like Apple Health, Garmin's another one that will do it as well. There's other ones that will provide pretty accurate estimations of VO2 max without you having to go through the intensity of getting a VO2 max test done. I have seen my numbers increase over the last probably 4 weeks by about 10%, which I'm very excited about by doing these intervals. So kind of back to the interval, the VO2 max is heart rate based. So for me, my heart rate max approximately, haven't done like full out test on this, is I think right around 187 beats per minute. And when I do VO2 max training, I am staying above 170 for a bulk duration of the interval, but definitely creeping up into the 180s. So it's pretty hard training, and it's 4 minutes of all out. I won't say all out, 90 to 95% out run. And then it's a 4-minute break after that. So 4-minute recovery. I say break. I'm either doing like a light jog or a walk to really cool down and bring the heart rate down. And then I repeat that 3 more times. So 4 intervals of work for VO2 max. So at max capacity, basically 90 to 95% of heart rate, max heart rate for that time period. And then 4 recoveries. And then I do a cool down for 10 minutes. And I do that twice a week. I know it's intensive. It hurts. There's no doubt about it. It's quite painful, but I've seen it move the needle on heart rate variability. I've seen it move the needle on heart rate. I have seen it significantly impact my emotional and physical health. I feel better when I do it. And then I also combine that with 4 to 5 times a week of strength training. So building muscle mass, building strength and stability for generally around 45 minutes per workout. So that's exercise. Let's talk about nutrition now. So nutrition is another very important pillar that I probably paid a lot more attention to, maybe even more so than exercise, to about, I don't know, let's say 3 or 4 years ago. And then I think very similar to Peter Attia, and I would say that he has been one of the primary reasons that I've changed a little bit of my view on this. From a longevity health span and mental and emotional health span, I probably put exercise maybe a little bit more above nutrition. Not saying that I've just thrown everything out the window and eat nothing but Burger King and McDonald's every day. I don't do that at all, really. Not to toot my own horn, but I don't see it as the primary focus. I place a lot more emphasis on exercise. Nutrition for me is very protein forward. There's a very large scale role of protein in mental health. Protein, made of the amino acid chains, are the building blocks of neurotransmitters. So we actually know that without those amino acids that come in from our diet, the ability to produce effectively and efficiently neurotransmitters in the brain, so those are things like dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, a lot of the drivers and modulators of mood, they don't work. Or I wouldn't say they don't work. I will say that they are not enhanced without proper intake of protein within the diet. And I would say that for me, I had a lot more emphasis on moderating protein and increasing things like fat and reducing carbs. But I've kind of changed my tune a little bit on that, given the latest research. And then also experimentation on how I feel, what I see on things like continuous glucose monitors. I would say that now I eat a more heavy or protein forward diet, moderate fat diet, and then more like a moderate carbohydrate diet. Very omnivorous. I'm not afraid of basically any carb that's natural, not overly processed. I'm not talking about Twinkies and donuts and all those other things. Stay away from those still. But things like rice and sweet potato and potatoes and other carbohydrate load, they don't scare me as much, especially with the exercise regimen I'm on. And I feel good. And I'm still doing some fasting, but not as extensive as I used to. And again, I'm feeling good. Sleep, I've been focusing on that a lot. I've never been a poor sleeper, except for maybe like when I was a resident or when I was an intern. I worked a lot of hours, a lot of chaotic hours. And so I would say that my sleep was rather poor then. My other behavioral habits weren't great either back then. But other than that, I've never had like significantly poor outcomes for sleep. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to optimize them and make them ideal. So for me, I got an 8 sleep a few months ago. And I used another device prior, but 8 Sleep sent me their device. Not this podcast and video is not sponsored by 8 Sleep. Actually, none of the stuff that I'm talking about here is today. I just want to relay like what I've been doing and how effective it's been for me. But oh my goodness, it's a game changer for me. 8 Sleep is incredible. Yes, it gives you really good data for sleep, even though the HRV data, I'm sure it is bunk. I do not look into their HRV data, but their sleep staging data actually find to be pretty accurate. But for me, I didn't get it for the sensors. I got it for the cooling and heating capacity and its ability to regulate throughout the night based on sleep architecture. So actually looking at what stage of sleep you're in, whether it's deep sleep or non-REM or REM or light or even awake, like where are you at, and then adjusting the bed temperature accordingly. I found it to be phenomenal. My heart rate is lower, my HRV is higher, my overall subjective experience is better. I feel better waking up, and I don't have nearly as many early morning awakenings throughout the night like I used to. So my 8 Sleep is like my go-to. The next one is I've really focused on lighting and overall just stimulation before bed. We put our kids down at like early, like they're in bed by like 7:30. So like 8 o'clock rolls around and my wife and I might watch a little bit of TV, but it's never anything like overly stimulating. It's pretty lighthearted. But a lot of times, like around 9 o'clock, I'm ready to go upstairs and like at least get in bed and just shut like the brain down. And sometimes, actually most nights I'll do a bit of reading, low light. I've got red light glasses on, just have the red bulbs in our room are on. I know it might sound a little bit odd, but it just helps me to downregulate the brain and the body for sleep. Maybe do a little bit of meditation, some downtime, breathing training, and like I mentioned before, reading. And I normally just drift right to bed, and it's phenomenal. So I haven't done a lot to adjust for sleep over the last few months, but I do believe I have a really good kind of routine and way to optimize some of those areas. I know a lot of people are going to ask about functional breathing training, or what you may refer to as breath work. I prefer functional breathing training. I think breath work has gotten maybe a little bit too woo-woo in some sects or some areas. So I like functional breathing training, which is more like an oxygen advantage type term. I'm doing a lot of resonance breathing, a lot of biofeedback. Obviously, it's the core of what we do at Hanu in terms of the app. And I find that every time I do it, it reinforces why I've done it. When I see a 50, 100, 200% increase in heart rate variability over the course of 60 seconds, 2 minutes, that is really compelling. What is that telling me? That's telling me that my nervous system is adjusting accordingly. It is listening to me when I speak. When I tell it to downregulate and relax, it says, yes, sir. And that's the type of nervous system that you want, is one that when you command it to do something, it does it. And it allows you to change your state in almost the snap of a finger and in almost an instant. Resonance breathing does it for me every time. My nervous system moves and it shifts, and I subjectively feel more relaxed and steady and grounded, more resilient to stress. And my body, or my data, my numbers, would also suggest that that is indeed what has happened. So if you're not doing a form of functional breathing training, the one that I would introduce is that go get your Hanu and do resonance breathing. And I think that you will be blown away that the more and more you practice this, the more and more you will see that dial move in an upward direction. And it's incredibly potent. It's incredibly potent. So I would challenge you, as my mic over here shakes as I hit it with my chin, I would challenge you to look into that as being a primary option for you, resonance breathing, because it truly helps to resonate your vagus nerve and your autonomic nervous system to cool down, your blood pressure to regulate. All these things are really important. Next thing I've done is a lot of oxygen advantage training. So enhancing CO2 tolerance. I don't want to speak too much about it because we've done so many podcasts with Patrick McEwen and other individuals that I'll just say I've been doing a lot of oxygen advantage practice. Been doing a lot of gratitude work and stoic work. And by stoic work, I mean a lot of stoic readings and stoic journaling. The evidence is very clear that when we take the time to both give and receive gratitude, it changes us for the better. It changes our neural pathways. It changes our autonomic nervous system. Heart rate variability goes up. It has been studied clinically that when individuals participate in a gratitude-based practice, gratitude journaling, that they themselves will see regulation of their autonomic nervous system. And I see it as well when I do it. So I've been doing a lot of stoic work as well. You'll see a lot of that kind of built in as we progress with Hanu. Meditation and mindfulness. Meditation and mindfulness are a core practice of ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. And the reason that they're a core practice is because ACT identifies that sometimes we get so fused with our thinking that we just get on autopilot. And the only way that we can diffuse from our thinking and learn the state of acceptance of our emotional experience is to turn off autopilot and to be mindful of our present moment without judgment, just experiencing what we're experiencing, not for the sake of changing anything, but for the sake of being human. Humans don't live in the past. We don't live in the future. We live at the current breath we're taking, which is another reason why breathing is so important. But I would argue mindfulness is a extremely potent tool. And it doesn't mean that you need to sit down for 30, 45 minutes or an hour. It could just be a 10-minute meditation. And that's what I've been doing, about 10 minutes every day. But it moves the needle. I wear my Hanu when I do it. And what do I see? I see immense changes in my nervous system. It is one that has to be a staple for me. Meditation will continue to be a staple. The last thing that I want to talk about in regards to my emotional journey is something that I've been doing, which is more like a hack on something that I've always done, or at least that I frequently or consistently practice, which is walking. And it's walking and thinking deeply. I read an amazing book by Cal Newport called Deep Work. I read it a while back. And what he talks about in his book is that he does what are called like meditative walks. And basically these are meditative walks where he takes one problem in his day that he's trying to solve. And during that meditative walk, he thinks about that one problem. And when anything else creeps in, anything else, he simply just guides himself back to that one problem. I do that a lot, but I also do more like, I guess you could call them nature walks, where I just go around and observe. And if a thought comes into my head, an anxiety-provoking one, I acknowledge it. Hey there, mind. There you are. And simply just bring myself back to the sounds, the sights, the smells, the tastes, the feels, all the five senses in these meditative walks. So I do like a combination of these more or less like mindful nature walks and thinking deeply, problem-solving walks, like Cal Newport said. I love this quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. He says, "All truly great thoughts are conceived while walking." I totally agree with that. I may not agree with everything that Nietzsche proposed, and he had his own problems, but it's a great quote. All truly great thoughts are conceived while walking. And in the shower, that's the other one. On the run, walking, and in the shower. Those are like the places where I just have like these epiphanies, light bulbs go off. And I like to build them in. I build them in every day, typically in the morning, so I can go get that fresh sunlight in the eyes, help to reset the circadian rhythm, but also just to think deeply and solve problems before I get going on the day. And then I want to talk now in the podcast with my venture that I'm on that I'm really excited about. And I mentioned at the very beginning of this podcast, but I want to talk now about accountability in relationships and how that is deeply intertwined with emotional and mental health. I know, again, I sound like a broken record. You've heard me say this if you listen to this podcast, but we are inherently relational beings. There's no doubt about it that we are meant to be in a tribe. We are meant to be communal. We are meant to be part of our society. We are communal beings at our core. And so when we try to go on this journey all by ourselves, sometimes we can make it out okay. But most of the time, I have found that people truly need that high level of accountability. They need somebody to walk with them. So I have somebody walking with me now. I have a health coach. And I will tell you that there is so much that I am learning, and I am so excited about health coaching and having someone there who can play that objective bystander, who can call me out on my BS, who will be there to support me. I think it's paramount. I think that if you truly want to take back your mental health and well-being, all the stuff that I've talked about thus far is really helpful. But I think the societal connection, the accountability portion, is one that you just simply cannot overlook because it is so incredibly potent and powerful to have that objective bystander who's willing to walk with you on that journey, to listen to you intently, and then to help guide. And when you find someone who truly will listen to you, not with the intent of responding, but will listen to you with the intent to hear and understand, then you found something special. I mean, it's the reason why for us at Hanu, we said it's imperative to have coaches, myself and others that we've trained and I've vetted, to meet you where you are, to be that guide, to help you to understand and walk with you and give you amazing tools. But above all, it's to stand by you. It's to walk with you on this journey. So that's why we have our Hanu certified coaches. That's why you have the ability to go on right now and see these individuals. And I found to myself, I had to do a lot of soul searching. I said, I need one of these myself. And if I need it and can benefit from it, then you can too. And so my call to action for you is to really do some soul searching and some deep diving into how are you living a life that's congruent with your values. So you have to first identify what are your values. And then how do you move forward in life in all of these pillars of health, find accountability, and actually put things into action, commit to action. And a great way, obviously, I'm going to be the fox guarding the henhouse here, is to get a coach, get someone who is going to call you on your BS. They're going to be someone who's also going to listen intently and they're going to help you. That's what the Hanu certified coaching program and our services are here at Hanu. It's what I do. It's what our coaches do. And it's what I receive myself personally, because I see and understand just all the immense benefits of it. All of these things together, combined, make for such a potent and aggressive approach to mental wellness and emotional health. Quit letting emotional health be on the back burner like I did. It's going to catch up to you. It's got to be the foundation of your pyramid. If you don't have good emotional health, then who cares if you have a really fit cardiovascular system? Who cares if you're getting good sleep? Who cares if you're like eating all the right foods? Oh, that's great. Like, we need those. But why? If you feel like crap, if you're stressed all the time, if you're anxious, if you're depressed, why does any of that other stuff matter? You want to elongate your health span and lifespan just so that you can emotionally and psychologically and relationally feel like garbage for another 10, 20 years? If that's the case, then honestly, I feel sad for that motive. I don't want that motive. I don't want to like do all these things for my health, wellness, and longevity and not have good emotional health or good relationships. I'm just elongating more suffering on the emotional side, maybe delaying, let's say, the physical impact that aging has on the body, but emotionally, I'm not there. And also, kind of just hit me, a light bulb, epiphany moment, if you will, and I'm not in the shower, I'm not walking or running, is that if you are extending your lifespan, if you're extending your health span, or at least if your goal is to expend lifespan and health span, and you're not addressing emotional health, well, you're leaving a lot on the table. You're doing a lot of damage. So this is, again, why we have Hanu, both our platform and why we have our services to help with this. It's helped me. It'll help you. And our coaches, they know what they're doing. They have amazing skills and they have an amazing tool to use and help you track and take back your emotional and mental health. So the question that I leave you with today as we end the podcast is, are you living a life that is congruent with your value system? Or are you doing kind of like I was doing and having a very difficult time with marching through life, trying to do all that you can to survive, but emotionally and stress-wise just crumbling? And if you are that person, I just say it's time. It's time to take the step, commit to some action, and quit living life, kind of dragging your feet and dreading waking up each morning and dreading going to work and dreading. It's time to end it now. All right, everybody, if you're interested in Hanu Health at all, check us out, hanuhealth.com. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at Hanu Health. Also, if you're interested in our Hanu Health coaching services, if you head on over to hanuhealth.com and you click on the coaching link, you'll see all of the services packages that we offer. And if you're interested in working with me, there's also a link there as well. It's great being able to chat and see you all here. I can't really see you, but you can see me if you're watching on YouTube. But it's great to always come here and have this chat with you. Looking forward to bringing so much new content that's really going to be a lot more emotional, mental health focused in the future. All right, everybody, take care. Have a wonderful rest of your day and week. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Hanu Health Podcast. This show would not happen without listeners and supporters like you. And the best way to support us and the show is to head on over to iTunes and provide us with a 5-star review. This helps us to reach others and share our knowledge and expertise on improving mental wellness. If you're interested in working with one of our therapists or using our platform, head on over to hanuhealth.com or reach out to us at info@hanuhealth.com. Tune in next time and have a wonderful week.